Alright, so we often like to entertain the idea of the world being destroyed, but the truth of the matter is, outside of FGO, there's a lot of systems in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. But what if I told you of a circumstance where the world wasn't so fortunate? Enter Nasu's Notes, a post-apocalyptic timeline where the world has gone to dust. Everything is in shambles, they can't grow vegetation, most of the foods are now poisonous, it's a mess. This resulted in the emergence of a new subspecies, the A-rays, humans that have been modified to survive the planet, and only 100 of them are said to exist. Once the resources started to become scarce, the humans went into the Great War with the A-rays to fend for what was left. So on top of the planet already being finished, you got two sides over here making it even worse. As a final resort, the planet itself decided to send out a distress signal to the other planets saying, hey, get these creatures off of me. So the other planets of our solar system plus Pluto sent out the strongest beings of their kind, the ultimate ones, otherwise known as the types. Each one of these entities have enough power to wipe out every single being on the planet. The ultimate ones pull up to Earth smack dab in the middle of their war and start to eviscerate everybody. No remorse. The A-rays and the humans then realize the only way that either of us are gonna survive is if we band together. So that's what they did. They put their differences to the side to go up against the types. Now the A-rays weren't the only new species to come out of this. Towards the end of the war, the humans began production of the liners, a group that would be recognized as the new generation of humans. They were better because, unlike the humans, the liners didn't need machinery or medicinal support to survive the planet's new atmosphere. Oh, by the way, the planet itself isn't the only thing that went to ruin. Apparently, you can't even breathe without the extra help because the grain just flowing through the atmosphere will straight up kill you. The interesting thing about the liners is that they were created in a way where the grain actually helps them instead of harm them. Liners specifically make use of this grain and make it function like a new bone. Once they reach adulthood, the grain will start to emerge from their body as a night arm. This is only true for the children who have accumulated the most of it. The ones with the strongest night arms are then designated as the ether liners and were chosen to battle against the A-rays, at least before they joined forces. And just to show how rare they are, there were only 78 known on the entire planet. A great example that we have for one of these knights is Otto Adam. His night arm is known as Slash Emperor, and it was strong enough to slice the entirety of type Jupiter in half in one strike. He did the same to Saturn. Just the aura of this weapon was strong enough to split the blood skies that were around it, revealing to us what Earth is truly supposed to look like. The arm has even been shown to expand in size in relation to the size of the enemy by taking in the grain that's around it. When he sliced type Jupiter in half, the fake sun that's being used as its core exploded and burned the entire continent. Ain't no way! I just want to point out that this is described to be a simple night arm. A weapon that can murk the incarnation of two planets is described as simple. I don't even want to imagine what advanced would look like, but because the people feared his power and how strong he could actually get, they decided to imprison Adam in Witch Swift Umbrella Castle, and he hasn't been heard from since. Now, if you remember Fate Zero, Dead Apostles play a pivotal role in the Nasuverse, and there's an even higher branch of Dead Apostles known as the Dead Apostle Ancestors. The A-rays were led by the Dead Apostle Ancestors that were collectively known as the Six Sisters. Basically, they were 6 vampire witches that each had a power that was stronger than all of the A-rays combined. We don't know much about type Pluto, but it's said that they were the ones that took him down, and when they killed him, his blood is what covered all of the sky on Earth, painting it red. It's also been implied that the resurrection of the Six Sisters, or the Dark Six, is what caused the devastation of Earth in the first place. This was from the ritual Aylesbury Valesti, which depleted all of the mana on the planet just to bring them back, very similar to Fate Extra. The ritual was supposed to unite all the apostles and help them gain a foothold over the planet. You can see how that's working out for them. During the war, one of the sisters was defeated by a knight, and before she passed away, just her crying was enough to split an entire continent open and leave what would later be known as the Great Rift. This same rift is where Umbrella Castle is located, where they had Otto Adam in prison. But now that the types had showed up, even the six sisters had to focus on them. So the first thing that they did was wove a barrier through the clouds that would keep some of the types at bay. They could still do damage, but at the very least it would keep some of it mitigated. The reason that the types are so strong in the first place is because they're basically incarnations of the entire planet. They cannot be killed by normal means because they lack the concept of death, meaning that you would need a conceptual weapon or something on that level to even harm them. They have no earthly knowledge, but there are some types that have shown the ability to acquire some if you give them enough time. The only thing that's certain is that the humans, the A-rays, and the liners are all viewed as their natural enemy. You done disrespected baby girl Earth, and now you gotta see us. So, the juicy part. Let's get off into the types. First off, we're gonna get into type Jupiter. They are described to be a black giant made out of photon gas with a pseudo-sun in the middle as their core. Their body is said to be several kilometers long. For the sake of this video, we'll just say that it's 5. Its body is 5 kilometers long. That's like 3 miles. That's like getting in your car and driving for 7 minutes straight, and that's his whole body. It's said to have a humanoid figure, and what's even worse is that this gas can theoretically expand to infinite proportions. Now, his arrival was brutal. It showed up and started destroying everything on the western continent. Most notably, it destroyed the protected region that was housing the last unmodified humans. As I mentioned before, people now need machinery and medicine in order to survive, but they could last inside of this region as long as they didn't step outside into the grain too long. They tried to fight back, the types were too much. They were just too unequipped. Nothing they had at their disposal could harm them. They couldn't even put a scratch on type Jupiter. Then we have type Venus, also known as Vivi. Originally, her form is a 1 kilometer long carnivorous plant with enormous wings on its back in the form of trees. Outside of the moon, type Venus is said to be the closest ultimate one in nature to Earth. In contrast to the other types, her approach was a bit different. When she showed up to the planet, she waited around in the clouds looking for a spot to release her spores. Once she began to make her move, the ether liners and gun god had to gang up on her and took her down in a week-long operation. The heat that was coming out of her wings took down nearly every plane that was around her, but they eventually got her. After they spent some time monitoring her corpse, they built an entire city on top of it with towers that reached up into the sky. This was known as the City of the World Trees, named after the wings on her back. What they began to realize is that they could use her remains as a life source, and it became the only inhabitable place on the planet. However, countless spores that emerged from her corpse were launched into the nearby area as terminals, and these terminals gave life to angels that would go out and attack the people in the city. That in mind, they had a whole team of angel hunters that were designated to track them down, Gun God being one of them. 5 years later, a pseudo-angel resurrected from her corpse, and this was the actual Vivi. Due to her having properties of a parasite, she was gaining sentience from the people that was living on top of her, and ended up molding a humanoid body because of it. Luckily for us, when she was reborn, she wasn't volatile, but had she actually landed and completed her original task like she was supposed to, she would have never gained this sentience, and they would have been doomed. Her reborn version actually felt different about the situation because she had enough time to understand that the humans weren't bad people. Some of her powers are noted as projecting a colossal image of herself and healing mental wounds. Next we have ORT, who for the longest time we thought was type Mercury, but it turns out that he's actually a type from the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud being the icy layer that wraps around our entire solar system. His design is described to be an alien spider that can hide himself inside his shell at will. His body itself has properties of a marble phantasm, meaning that just him existing can affect the space that's around him. In the place that he resides in FGO, which is South America, the entire area has been turned into alien crystal. In the past, it is known for one-shotting one of the dead apostle ancestors that tried to hunt him down and took his place on the list. Keep in mind that these ancestors at the time were easily one of the most formidable entities on this planet, and ORT was like, who cares, get packed. Next we have Type Saturn. Now Type Saturn is credited for being 3 kilometers long. It is seen to be an aerial fortress, and out of all the types, it operated as the leader. It's the one that received the order from the planets and communicated that to the other types. The outer covering of its shell is made from a bright unknown mineral. When it comes to the main attack, it can drop an entire electromagnetic cross that explodes on impact. It can even modify these crosses to burrow through the ground and cause earthquakes. Now we got Type Moon. Type Moon, Type Moon, Type Moon, otherwise known as the Crimson Moon Broonstud. He is the Vampire King. He is the father of all the vampires in the Nasuverse and the father to all the ancestors and dead apostles by extension. From the original Tsukihime, he is the one that bit Zelrech and turned him into an apostle. In the remake, this was now done by one of his children. He has the highest level of mystic eyes that you can possibly have, that being of the rainbow category. So think on the level of Shiki's mystic eyes that can pierce the concept of death into anything, a level that we would call a miracle. Again, he is the incarnation of the moon itself, and his story is basically spending his time looking for a proper body. He could never find a proper vessel because there was never anybody that could match his caliber of power. That's where his reality marble comes in. By the way, he has that. His reality marble links to his Millennium Castle, a mystic region that spawned the first line of ancestors. See, he can take over his children, and one of the only quality vessels that he could use was his daughter, Archetype Earth. When you think about this idea of him looking for a proper vessel, it's very reminiscent to Kirei saying that the alien god could only use ORT to match her power. Like I was saying before, all of Nasu's ideas come full circle. Like the ether liners, Crimson is said to have his own version of a night arm that we haven't seen. He also has a tornado attack that can reach up into space. Then we have Archetype Earth, the full-fledged version of Arkaway Broonstud. In the past, it has been flat out stated that the Earth can't create a mirror image of itself, so Archetype Earth is the one that operates as our type in its place. She is the highest being of Earth, and she has an authority over the entire planet. Anything that's reasonable can be willed into existence. Earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, lightning bolts, just to name a few. To put it lightly, she was so powerful that she locked herself inside of chains that was inside of a castle that's inside of a reality marble for the sake of everybody else. Because she knows in the instance that her father takes over her body and gets on bad timing like she's supposed to, it's over with for everybody, okay? She has access to marble phantasms, the actual origins of reality marbles. When you think of marble phantasms, they're basically what reality marbles pretend to be. Instead of laying a fake dimension on top of the world, she can actually manipulate and distort the world itself. And then finally, our main character, the main protagonist, and the last human left at the time of the story, Gun God. He is the one that dug up the original version of Black Barrel that you see in FGO. He lost his entire family and his home back when Type Jupiter's death burned the entire continent. Now that he's 20, naturally he's on hots with all of them. He is the one that took down the original form of Type Venus with Black Barrel, leaving Venus in perpetual slumber. These efforts are what got him enlisted in the fight against Type Saturn, where he unfortunately lost his life because his plane got too close to the enemy. Him surviving the grain up until that point was thanks to a unique formula. I do want to mention that he did establish a firm relationship with Venus after she was reborn. We don't know much about Type Neptune or Uranus other than their attack on the city of the World Trees. This just goes to show how crazy Nasu's hand is. This is from 1999. This is before Tsukihime, before Fate Stay Night. Majority of this is fragmented on 12 pages, and this is what he came up with. Of course, these concepts are subject to change, but the foundation is wild.